Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. You can find me across social media as the Baba Duchess. I am a movie critic, horror blogger, and drive-in mutant. And one of these days, I will settle on an intro for this channel. And today, I am not talking about one specific movie, but about the horror genre at the Oscars. And yes, I admit I am an Oscar ceremony watcher. I try to watch all of the Best Picture nominees every year, and also those that maybe didn't get a Best Picture nod, but featured performances from people who did get nominations for acting. Do I understand why people could not care less about the Oscars? Yes, I do. I watch simply because I am a movie lover, and I also like to play armchair critic and boo the TV when someone I felt was worthy did not win the award, like this year, Delroy Lindo. But yes, in the grand scheme of things, they're silly. It's an award show. They don't really matter. Yes, it's a lot of rich people patting themselves on the back, but every now and again, you do get some truly great moments. I remember getting choked up when Brendan Fraser won his Oscar after so many years away from the industry, and the same with Ke Huy Quan. And 2026 did have quite a few of those moments for me, whether it was Amy Madigan getting her Best Supporting Actress award, or the fact that Autumn Dewald Arkapaw was the first woman to win the award for Best Cinematography, and she won for Sinners. So, long story short, are they actually important? No, but it also does sometimes say a lot about where we are as a culture, a country, or a society. Overall, I enjoyed this year's ceremony. They did play it a little safe. But what I'm really going to be talking about in this video, and why I was really looking forward to this year's ceremony, was I wanted to see how well those nominated horror movies did end up performing. I am going to be talking about a little bit of history of horror movies at the Oscars, um, really my opinion on why it really hasn't been recognized as a genre for the most part, and talk about some horror movie performances that I think were overlooked, if not outright snubbed. Generally speaking, the horror genre has not performed well in the big, I'll say, flashy categories. The Academy has not been shy about nominating horror movies for things like costuming, makeup, score. We've seen things like The Omen, which won for Best Score. Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992 won for Best Costume Design, Best Makeup, and Best Film Editing. Starting back in 1931, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Friedrich March did tie with Wallace Beery for the Best Actor award, and it was also nominated for Best Adaptive Screenplay and Cinematography. And when you go forward to 1943, you will see that the Phantom of the Opera, now this is a version with Claude Rains, personal favorite of mine. His Invisible Man is my favorite Universal monster.
Put a warm rug in the car. It's cold outside when you have to go about naked.
But in this version, he plays the Phantom. And this version has the distinction of being the only Universal monster of having won an Academy Award. It won for art direction and cinematography, and was also nominated for Best Musical Score and Best Sound Production. It has a wonderful score that uses a lot of Tchaikovsky. Obviously, that's not original score, but if you've missed that version, I do suggest that you check it out. But I will warn you that as someone who shares the first name with the lead female character, you will get sick of hearing that name over and over and over again. So, in the earlier days of the Academy Awards, especially, they really did not shy away from the horror genre. I don't know if because these were maybe seen as more classic stories, whereas now a lot of original horror content doesn't seem to get recognized. You'll even see where things like Jaws or The Exorcist that were nominated, they were also already based on books. It just seems to be this hint of, well, it was based on a book, so it's okay. But makeup, especially, has been a category that the horror genre has ruled. Things like An American Werewolf in London that won Best Makeup. The Wolfman in 2010 won Best Makeup. And one thing I noticed too is In general, the Academy is kind of notorious for rewarding certain projects if they're attached to a certain director. I've noticed they like to award a lot of Tim Burton's films. You can see that with, Sleepy Hollow won one for art direction, Beetlejuice won one for makeup. So, my point here isn't that it's unusual for the Academy to recognize horror, but it's just they only seem to feel comfortable doing it in certain categories because all of a sudden, when the bigger awards, best actor or actress, best movie, best director, those are the categories they don't really seem to want to reward the genre for. Again, we've seen it in the 30s with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with acting, but we wouldn't see another acting win until Ruth Gordon for Rosemary's Baby in the 60s. And then after that, there would not be another win for an acting role until Kathy Bates in Misery in the 90s. And the year after Kathy Bates' win is where things get a little interesting for me. That is the year when Silence of the Lambs swept the major award categories. You had Best Film, Best Director, Lead Actor, Lead Actress. The last two, of course, going to Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster. Now, why I say this is interesting is because the industry really didn't want to call this one a horror movie. They kept talking about it as a thriller. And while I'm not saying that is completely inaccurate, it's a horror movie. An FBI agent is trying to get information from a serial cannibal about another serial killer who kills women and wants to use their skin to make a literal suit for himself. If that does not scream horror movie, I do not know what does. And it's just one of those things that as I got older, it just really irked me in that way where no, this is not a hugely important issue, but as a lover of the genre, it just got under my skin. Just call it a horror movie, just call it what it is. But as we know, of course there's this air of snobbery about the Oscars. Again, it is. It's a lot of, rich people congratulating themselves on this beautiful art they made and only certain people are allowed in the party. The awards exclude comedy to a degree as well. I will say that as they have diversified the voting body, at least the kinds of movies that we've been seeing over the past few years have changed. They're not all the same. They're not all just, what period drama that manipulates you until you start weeping is going to win this year. This year, especially, I thought there at least was a nice variety of different types of movies. Was it drama heavy? Yes. But we had things like Sinners. We had something like Begonia, which I guess technically classified is like a dark comedy. But I think as we hear from younger voters, voters that aren't specifically working in drama, you're going to see more and different movies recognized. And that's a good thing. For something that should overall just be fun, it shouldn't be a slog to, if you want to, sit through all these movies. It shouldn't feel like you're sitting through the same movie over and over again, just with different faces in a different time period. What I also like that has changed is, and this was the case with Get Out from 10 years ago, and then, of course, with Sinners this year, is that those were both movies that were released almost a full year before the Oscar ceremony. And normally we see just this huge glut of the Oscar bait movies come out between October and December. So it is really nice to see people remembering some movies that came out months prior instead of just kind of favoring this recency bias. Great worthy movies come out all year long because I can remember sitting and watching a movie in May and thinking, well, I think this is Oscar worthy, but they're never going to remember this come nomination time. And usually I was right. So I do see a lot of changes, and this kind of comes with the overhaul of the voting body. Because I remember even 15 years ago sitting there and just thinking the process, it just must have been just a bunch of just old farts just sitting around saying, oh, okay, will Meryl Streep do anything this year? Okay, nominate that. Where it would just seem to be, we're just looking for a couple things that fit a couple criteria, and that'll be it. We just wanna favor a couple actors, a couple directors, and we'll move on from there. And I feel now that the work gets looked at a little more, It's still a very imperfect process because how do you quantify art? But I do feel like more voters are having a say in what gets looked at seriously to be an award winner. And now, unlike with Silence of the Lambs, they don't need to kind of hide behind, oh, it's a thriller. Now, especially with this year, they can actually say, oh, yes, this is a horror movie. Because again, after those wins for Silence of the Lambs, we did not see another acting award until Natalie Portman won for Black Swan. And since that year, there have not been any winning performances in a horror movie. But this year, we got Amy Madigan for Weapons for Best Supporting Actress, and of course, Michael B. Jordan for the lead role in Sinners. And I was very, very excited when Amy Madigan won. That was a really, really tough category. There were a lot of solid performances in that category. I really did think it was going to go to Tiana Taylor for One Battle After Another. I was shocked that Amy Madigan was nominated for her role as Gladys, let alone won. And for me, that's because so much attention was paid to the more outlandish version of Gladys. And spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about weapons a little bit. That I don't feel like a lot of attention was paid to the other side of that performance, those quiet moments when it was just Gladys and Alex. And she had this very soft, quiet menace, getting him to do what she wanted him to do by just quietly threatening him, saying, I can make your parents hurt each other. And just a very matter of fact, you're going to do this or I'm going to do this. I kind of wish they had chosen that part for the clip they show during the ceremony because I can hear, and not that it matters, I can hear people saying about that performance, oh, they just picked her because, it was just weird and outlandish. And I don't think, um, especially for those that haven't actually seen it, of course, they wouldn't know about that other side of the performance that I thought was so effective. And how exciting was it for Michael B. Jordan to win that Best Actor nomination? Because I know everyone thought it was going to be Timothée Chalamet's year, but I'm glad it wasn't because that is such a hard thing to do, what Michael B. Jordan did in that movie. Because, yes, you're playing two parts, which is difficult all on its own. But because the twins are there are subtle differences between them. You don't have two widely different personality in terms of one is just this flamboyant, huge personality, and the other one is just a little quiet mouse. They're twins, and each one is their own person. And you definitely know when you're watching who is Smoke and who is Stack, but they're not wild differences. And that's what makes that performance so good. And then on top of what was done with the cinematography, direction, everything just came together to make that just such a standout performance. And this, of course, is where I complain that Delroy Lindo did not win because I remember the first time I saw that movie and I reviewed it on this channel. It was one of my first ones. And I remember saying that he will take his nomination and win right now. Thank you. He was so good. And I am a sucker for a quiet performance. It's not a showy performance. And also, he does a lot of different things where we have that scene in the car that is so visceral and heartbreaking. And then he can turn around and another part of the movie is making you laugh. I just love that character. And I just really wanted to see that win, especially for an actor who has been in the industry for so long and hasn't gotten that kind of recognition. And is it the most important thing in the world to have an Oscar? No. I mean, it's easy for me to say. Yes, it's ultimately meaningless because art is subjective. But sometimes you're just pulling for someone, whether it's because you've always liked them as an actor or you just really like what they did in that role. And that was a tough category. I also will say that as someone who I've been watching for a long time, and I was usually really good, I'm okay, that person will win, that person will win. The past couple of years have actually had some races that I really couldn't call. Unfortunately, it is not all performance dependent. The Oscars have their own politics behind the scenes. Timothy Chalamet, I know this year, and I'm not going to talk about it really. He had his own issue with what he had said about ballet and opera. I don't know how much that fed into it because I don't know how much of the vote was in, and I also don't want that to take away from Michael B. Jordan's win. And I'm gonna say it now, I think they played it safe with Best Picture because and again, I know art is subjective, but I just objectively say that Sinners was the best movie of the year. I liked one battle after another. I did. Um, it does have its problems for me. I will link some articles in the description box so you can see what I'm talking about. But for me, Sinners was just a perfect movie. There it really is not one criticism I could make about it. And everything from the directing to the cinematography, just all the technical stuff, all the acting, just everything about it was so meticulously, but also so passionately done. It's the most fun that I have ever had in a movie theater. I saw it 3 times in the movies theater. So I don't know. I mean, maybe one battle after another resonated with people because of some of the political themes it was dealing with. I get that. Like I said, I did enjoy the movie despite being problematic. But on a positive note, Sinners also picked up Best Score and Best Cinematography and Best Original Screenplay. I am a big fan of Paul Thomas Anderson, and I am happy for him. I have enjoyed most of his movies. Do I wish this one had gone to Ryan Coogler? Yes, I do. I'm not necessarily disappointed that Paul Thomas Anderson won because honestly, I do think he should have won that before now. The Oscars have also, they've always loved Guillermo del Toro, and why not? Guillermo is wonderful. He is my favorite director. But it was also, again, good to see the recognition for Frankenstein. Picked up Oscars for costume design, production design, and hairstyle and makeup. And The Ugly Stepsister was also nominated for hairstyling and makeup. So while I am happy for Guillermo's team, I did kind of want to see it go to that underdog, but that was a really impressive nomination to me. I liked that they were looking beyond what were obviously the 2 big horror movies of the year. It's little things like that that let me know that the Academy is looking differently at movies in general. So it was a very good year for horror winning awards. I was very prepared to be disappointed, and yes, again, Sinners is the best picture of the year, sorry, but being that it had a record 16 nominations and did pick up quite a few, and some very important ones. That cinematography win was huge. But my point is that overall, the horror genre really just has been so overlooked. There have been less than 10 nominees for Best Picture. And you're going to forgive me because I have to look at my notes here. But we had The Exorcist, Jaws, The Silence of the Lambs, The Sixth Sense, Black Swan, Get Out, the Shape of Water, The Substance, and then this year with Sinners. I see people leave out The Shape of Water when they're making a list of, past horror nominees, and it's a horror movie. It's a creature feature. It's very much Guillermo del Toro's own version of Creature from the Black Lagoon. I don't know if he's ever said that, but that's how I saw it. So it's a very small club. And I think that's just because horror's not for everybody, which is perfectly fine. When my local movie theater chain, when they'll do a mystery movie, they will always mark it if it's going to be horror. Other than that, you don't know. But if it is a horror movie, they will let you know. And I do think that's fair. Not everyone likes it, and it can really bother some people. Perfectly understandable. What I don't like, and I know a lot of us who, are horror fans, you've gotten it from at least one person where they say it in like that really just in a derivative manner of how can you watch that? What are you watching? Like my husband, not a big horror guy. He's never once given me crap about it because there's no need to. You just like what you like. I don't like romantic comedies. I don't feel the need to, I don't know, like berate people that do or insult their intelligence. And there's just something about the horror genre that I know a lot of us as fans, have experienced that. And no, it doesn't matter. Just watch what you want, but it's irritating. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what the Academy has done for so long, just kind of looking down their nose, unless, oh, okay, oh, this was adapted from a book. It's okay then. That's just my personal feelings on it. So starting with this year's nominees, and then again, seeing Amy Madigan get that win, I went, maybe things actually are changing. But then again, we're not going to know. There could be another horror movie that comes out this year that is very effective and people love and is, great on this technical scale that just gets completely ignored simply for being horror. And again, it doesn't matter. We know as horror fans that we're our own little island of misfit toys. We kinda like it that way, but I do like to see people get rewarded for their work. I know last year we thought was gonna be a decent year for horror, and while I was disappointed that Demi Moore lost because that was an amazing performance in a very risky movie to put out there, you don't know how something like that is going to be received. I do think that Mikey Madison did a very good job. I was disappointed, but I wasn't mad, like, how could you reward that performance? And hey, she's the only, Ghostface that has an Academy Award. It's technically horror related. The one that got me, though, was the, cinematography award last year. That should have gone to Nosferatu, period. That one stung a little bit. I'm just hoping this gives the genre a little shot in the arm, keep going forward. Because the other thing is, and this is kind of looking at it in more of a cynical way, if someone wins an Oscar for doing horror, well, that gives them a little more clout to be able to go on and maybe do another project like that. So I kind of see it as having a little capital to go on and make other interesting things that maybe wouldn't have gotten made if they didn't have like that recognition behind them, whether it is as a director or an actor or a writer. And of course, we all have those performances that were overlooked, snubbed, what have you. I will always look at Toni Collette in Hereditary, Lupita Nyong'o in Us, which again, that's another one. You're playing two different characters, and in hers, they were a lot more different than Michael B. Jordan's. But it's still you have to make them two distinct personalities without coming off, cartoonish. You still need people to be able to buy that these are two separate people. You don't want to just see the actor doing two different roles, and she did that beautifully. Anthony Perkins never got any Academy recognition for his work in Psycho, and I also think a lot of that too is because it is a very quiet performance, except for some stuff towards the end. And I know, generally speaking, the Academy likes the big, flashy, tearing at your clothes and all, those kinds of roles. And I really like to see when these quieter roles slip in. And don't get me started on Florence Pugh for Midsummer. I know she got a nod that year for Little Women, but she was amazing in Midsummer. That was such an all-time great performance. And it wasn't a surprise when it didn't happen, but and if you've ever seen the movie Possession, it came out in 1980 starring Elizabeth, Isabella Johnny and Sam Neill. Those are two great performance. Hers is absolutely bonkers, but in such a great way. And of course, that was something that was never gonna get that kind of recognition. It's a kind of movie, at least for me, I could only watch once, but it's just this masterclass in acting. And to see that, get overlooked, it's just one of those things where if voters looked at things beyond just this kind of narrow path of movies, more things like that would be recognized. So, those are a lot of my thoughts on the Oscars in general, this year's ceremony, and with a little history thrown in there for you. Horror doesn't need the accolades. As fans and as, a genre, we kind of like it being on the outside because a lot of us that are really into horror, that's where we feel we are, is just kind of on the outside of things. It's what draws us to that. That and being able to talk about some heavy issues without just getting really just maudlin or just overwrought. You don't feel as manipulated as you would in a drama that's tackling a heavy issue. It's less about needing to be rewarded and just deserving to be seen. Because in the end, none of that stuff actually does matter. I just have fun watching it and thinking about it critically and just, pretending for a night that I get to be, one of the critics that actually matters. But what were your thoughts on this year's ceremony? Did you watch? Did you not watch? Do you ever watch? Do you always watch? Go on and tell me some of your picks or what you wished would have won, what you thought should have won. March is a great month for new horror movie releases, so I will have some more reviews coming up. And I do plan on doing another Walpurgis Knock video for next month. be talking about some more witch movies. So please like, share, subscribe, comment, do all the stuff that, I don't know, feeds the algorithm and lets people see this. And as always, like what you like, don't be a dick, and empathy is a superpower.